after you develop your introductory paragraph, it's ready, your time to move into drafting the body of your paper. I realize this process that we're going through seems a little extensive given that you're going to be using this for time situations, but the goal is to practice and practice and practice until it becomes second nature and you can do it in time situations. So after I've developed my introductory paragraph, I'm going to move into developing the body of my paper. So we're going to talk about a new paragraph development strategy called SEXY. Usually makes all of my students giggle. I like to talk about how we have sexy bodies in our essays. But it's not spelled in the traditional way. And it's an acronym for statement, explanation, example, and interpretation. Basically what this means is if I'm looking at the rough outline I have, I'll have a topic sentence that focuses on whatever the sub-motif or sub-theme was for that particular block. And then for each of my specific supports, I'm going to develop that using the statement, explanation, example, and interpretation process. What that means is I'll give my introductory sentence, and then my statement explanation is kind of setting up my specific example from the text. So that would be like a general statement that introduces that specific example. Then I give the actual evidence from the text. And then the most important part of the SEXY process is the interpretation. This is what ties my specific example back to my thesis. This is what explains how my evidence supports my argument. Okay, so I'm going to give you examples for the first two paragraphs in my example outline. And I'm going to read through them and then pause so you can, I would suggest pausing the video so you can kind of look through it for yourself. And then I'll be going on to the second one. So if I look at the first block, I'm talking about race, and then I give 5 examples there. Now, it's always better to start with more and move it down to less, which is what I actually chose to do because it's a time situation and that would be a really long paragraph. So if we look at the paragraph I've developed here, it says Lee condemns the most prevalent prejudice of both the time in which she was writing as well as the time period of the setting of the novel, racism. So that introduces it. The Tom Robinson trial closely mirrors the Scottsboro trial of Lee's youth. Both involve a white woman falsely accusing a black man or black men of rape, and both result in the same verdict, regardless of the uncredible witnesses. Through this illusion, Lee scrutinizes the irrational tendency of society to give more weight to those deemed higher in the social caste, focusing specifically on how race influences social standing. Within this illusion, Lee also develops the overreaching metaphor of the novel through Tom Robinson. Casting his innocence as the harmless tune of the mockingbird, Lee passes her own verdict on those guilty of willful prejudice. As she so eloquently writes in Atticus's closing that the prosecutor hopes the jury will go along with the evil assumption that all, fill in the blank, lie, are immoral, etc. So just looking at that, you'll see that I only focused on 2 of the examples. The 2 that I felt were the strongest were the mockingbird and the illusion. And you'll see that this is my intro. This is my statement explanation. So I'm kind of introducing my example. This is where I get specific. I'm a little narrower now. Okay, and then this is my interpretation. And as I said, very important. Okay, this is what ties back to my thesis about what she's observing and what she's condemning. Okay, and this, again, I have my statement, explanation, and then here I've actually kind of combined the specific example and the interpretation together, which is fine as long as I do not necessarily need 3 independent sentences for each component. I do need to have all components though. So even if I have it all in one sentence, that's actually better. That means I'm writing with more compound, complex sentences. So take a minute and pause so you can kind of go through and read that again on your own and compare it to the example here. The next paragraph, when I read, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and pause and kind of go through that on your own. And if you have questions, so feel free to ask me either via email or in class whenever you're listening to it. Similar to how race impacts the caste system of a society, Lee explores the effects of socioeconomic status by juxtaposing the Negroes of the world of 1930s Macomb, Alabama with the Yules. Through distinct imagery, Lee contrasts the quaint and cozy cleanliness of the Negro quarters with that of the Yule resident just down the road beyond the town dump. Like the playground of an insane child, the Yule house symbolizes the destitution brought on not only because of the economic climate of the times, but by the poor choices of its family patriarch. Despite the whiteness of their skin, albeit difficult to see beneath the filth in which they live, Lee represents the station of their ilk in her placement and description of their home. Ironically, however, Lee offers a reminder that not all of any group should be lumped together. Mayella maintains a small pot of red geraniums, a symbol of her wish for a more beautiful life. Again, take a minute, go through, and see if you can identify the topic sentence, the statement explanation, the example, and the interpretation.